Okay, so today day 19, 16th October 2020. We'll start with some problem and object-oriented JavaScript, and uh, then the React. This is a page. Let me click the new tab. Okay, so yesterday we did palindrome. I'll continue doing the palindrome again little bit. So we have the function palindrome. It gets str, the string, and we have to check if it is palindrome. And palindrome is the string should be same from the left side and right side. Okay, so yesterday I wrote something like this: constant length is equal to str dot length. Then I did the every statement. I returned the every statement. So before using the every statement, I have to convert the string to array. Then I use every. Every statement is something like that. If every element, see, this will loop through every element of the array, and we return something true or false in each case. And if it is true in all the case, then overall the value of every will be true. Otherwise, overall value of every will be false. And this every should have an arrow function like this. And here now I'll check character. Okay, I get character here, and I get index also. I name it index with I, and I check character is equal to string, and I check with the last element length minus 1 minus I. And I return it. So if it is palindrome, the first character will match with the last, second character will match with the second last, and so on, and it will return true in all the cases. But if it is not a palindrome, it will return false in one of the case, and overall will become false. Now the problem is here is, if we have A, B, B, A, that means I checked A with A, and then I check B with B, then again I have to check this B with B, and then I check A with A. So we are doing 2 times the same work, first time and the second time. So we should avoid that second time work. We should only check the first time, and if it is matching, then we return true. So for that, we need to find the center, midpoint of this, and we have to go till midpoint only. So how to find the midpoint? I will write down the midpoint. Constant midpoint is equal to. Now I'll see if it is even. Okay, so if it is even, then I will return the midpoint will be total length divided by 2. So I will say length %2 is equal to 0. What I did, length %2, length is the number of characters, we get it from here. %2, this is a mode operator, modulus operator. It gives the remainder. So if I divide by this 2, remainder is 0. That means it is even number. here remainder is 0. So it is even. And now if I divide this by 2, 5 divided by 2. This means we divide by 2 and get the remainder. So if I divide by 2, I will get remainder as non-zero, and so it is odd number. So this is odd number, this is even number. If I get the midpoint, if I get even number, midpoint is total length divided by 2. And if it is not 0, then I add length plus 1, make it even, and then divide by 2. So this is a ternary operator. This ternary operator means if this part is true, take this, and if this part is false, take after this colon. So this is kind of if-else condition. So if it is even, we take the midpoint of 2, that is 2. And if it is odd, we take the midpoint of 3, that is, I add the length 1, make it even, and divide by 2. So that will be 5 plus 1, 6, 6 plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I have to go till 3. Here I have to go till 2 elements. Here I have to go 3 elements. Okay, something like that. And here I'll check console.log. Length is len, and midpoint is midpoint. Okay, so I check the midpoint, and here I will only go till midpoint. I will not go after the midpoint. So here I will say if I is greater than equal to 2, not 2, midpoint. If I is greater than equal to midpoint, then I will return it true. That means we are going through all, but we are not calculating the things for rest of 2. We are removing the complexity of calculation. We are returning the complexity of calculation after the midpoint. Okay, so that is the purpose of this one. Okay, so let me do here so that we know how much time it went. I'm just putting console.log to see what is coming. Okay, so I took the length and I calculate the midpoint. If it is even, I take the midpoint of 2, midpoint exactly the divide by 2, length divided by 2. And if it is odd, I add one number, that is length plus 1 divided by 2. And I go till, so for in this case, I get the midpoint 2. That means I'll go till the index 2. Before the index 2, here I get the midpoint of 3, that I'll go before the index 3. So that is the purpose of this palindrome. Okay, so now I'll check with something. I'll pass hello. So its length is 5, midpoint is 3, index is 0, and initially only it doesn't match, so it returns false. Let's do it with A, B, B, A. So here midpoint length is 4, midpoint is 2. Index is 0, character is A, 2 is A, index is 1. It goes till only 2. It doesn't went till the 4. Next is A, B, C, B, A. So midpoint is 5, midpoint is 3, total length is 5, we go only 3 times and we're not going after that. So the complexity, right now the complexity, this calculation is only one line. So, but that also we are avoiding after the midpoint. Okay, so this is something, another way of doing the palindrome. Let me save it. Okay, I will save in the JavaScript palindrome new file. Okay, so this is my palindrome. You can get the copy from the GitLab. Okay, so today's problem is done. We did the palindrome using every and midpoint. Let's go with the object-oriented part today. Okay, so let me clear it. So yesterday we saw the anonymous function and callback function. Today we'll see one more example of that. So we have seen some situations, common situations, where function that returns a value which you then pass to another function. So for example, we have a function called as multiply by 2, and it accepts. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to show you that we have a function, it returns a value, and then we pass that value to another function to process it. So this is the common scenario we see in our day-to-day life if we have done a lot of JavaScript. So let's see what I mean by example. So I have a function called as multiply 2. It accepts 3 parameters, loops through them, and multiply them by some number like 2, and then returns an array containing the result. Then there is a second function, add 1. Now that takes a value, adds 1 to it, and returns it. So we have two functions. One is called multiply by 2, and one is add 1. It takes 3 parameters, loop through them, multiply by some number like 2, and then returns the array. And then we have another function that takes a value, add 1 to it, and return it. So we'll do these two functions and see how the things are going. So I have a function multiply by 2, and I pass 3 parameter a, b, c. And here I will define sub variable var I var array. The array will be returned in the end. I can use constant and let also, but for simplicity I use var now. For I equal to 0, I go all the time, means it has 3 arguments, so I'll go 3 times. So to know, right now I'm doing manually hard code, but we can see, we can get the length of this argument also. But let's go 3. Because this example is only to show what I mean by these two functions. Okay, so now I put, every time I loop, first time I loop, I take the first argument and multiply by 2 and put it in this array. Then I take second argument, multiply by 2, put it in this array. Take third one, multiply by 2, put it in this array. So I'll do like this: array of I is equal to arguments of I into 2. So here I will get argument as A, second time I'll get B, third time I'll get C, because we can access this parameter using the arguments. And I'll return array. Okay, so this is my first function, and I'll create another function also, function add 1. Now it will take only one parameter and it will return add 1. Whatever value we pass, we add 1. So we have two simple functions. Now we'll use these two functions. First I'll do multiply by 2 and I'll pass 1, 2, 3, and I'll see. Okay, I'm getting some error. Okay, let's this array I should create this array as an array. I did not create the array. This should be array. Okay. Okay, so I pass 3 parameters. I get 2, 4, 6 because it's multiplying every number by 2. So 2 into 1, 2, 2 into 2, 4, 2 into 3, 6. And if I call add 1 of 100, I get 101. So I'll just show you what it does. It multiply by 2, it add 1. Now take one more example where we use both the functions. So for example, I have array like this, my array equal to this one, and then I will say my r equal to multiply by 2, I pass 10, 20, 30. So what I'm doing, I'm creating an empty array and I'm calling this function multiply by 2. It will give me 10 into 2, 20 into 2, 30 into 2, and I save it in my array variable. Okay, so let's put it here and I say my r, it is 20, 40 and 60. Okay, so now what I want to do, I will loop through 3 times because we have 3 elements. So now what I did, I looped through 3 times, and each time I say my add of I is equal to add 1. So here whatever value I am getting, I am adding it, I am passing to another function. So I'll check my R. So every time now it is 21, 41 and 61. Okay, so previously I called this one I get multiply by 2, now I get 21, 41, 61. So everything is working fine, but you will see I am running the loop 2 times. One time I'm running here in multiply by 2, and second time I'm running here the loop. So it is 2 times. 2 times running the loop. Okay, now it is 3 elements, so it is fine. But if it is many elements, so running it 2 times will cause too much time to work on it. So instead of doing this, we can have one function called as multiply by 2. I create another version of multiply by 2. I name it 2. And in this function, I will take 3 parameters, and I will take callback function in the same function, and I will write same thing what I wrote here, but I'll modify it a little bit. So it takes all the 3 parameters here, and then when I'm getting multiplying by 2, I will take this result and pass it to this callback function, and I press enter kind of thing. So now if I do my array of multiply by 2 and pass one function called as add1 here, and then I'm getting the result 21, 41, 61, the same result which I got previously, whereas previously I was using the loop 2 times. Here I avoided the loop 2 times by passing the callback, and callback was applied to each result in the for loop. So that means callback helps us here. Callback help us in saving the one for loop. So instead of so here so this is one this is the thing we use the callback to help us in avoiding the multiple for loop or doing something stuff which we do after taking result and passing it another function. So here we did in the same way, in the same loop, we pass the callback and process it in the same for loop. Now I call this add1. Instead of add1, I would have called the anonymous function, like function a takes a, and here I'll say return a plus 1. So instead of writing the add1, I would have written the anonymous function here, and it would have given the same result. So tomorrow, if I don't want add1, actually I want 2, I could have changed it to 2 and use it. So this is the way the callback works, and it helps us in doing many stuff. Here in this case, it helps us in reducing the for loop multiple times. So the purpose of this exercise was why we are passing the callback. So this is one example of using the callback. So that is the purpose of this exercise. So let me write down the purpose of this, what we did. So we did the callback and anonymous function, an example of, so what we did, callback, how to use callback, why to use callback, and anonymous function. Okay, so this is the part of object-oriented JavaScript. Let's move to the React part now. So today we'll do the useRef in the React. So the useRef is something, a different concept in React, and I will explain what it is and how to use it. Okay, let me create one. Let me create one example. So we have example 5. Let's create example 6. I will name it as example. Okay, so let me put it in the routing so I can use it. Example number 6. Okay, let's run the code. Okay, starting the code, and I'll go here. So till the server start, I started in the command line, so you are not able to see that. So let's try to see what exactly refs are. useRef is. So refs are a special, as I don't in some white. Okay, here I'll write down here. So refs are a special attribute that are available on all React components. So they are available in all React components. We can call useRef for the reference, and they allow us to create a reference to a given element when the component mounts. So they allow us to reference. So we refer something. Let's say I create one input box. I want to use that input box. So to change the properties of that input box, I use this use reference. And like a get element by ID in olden days, we use in the vanilla JavaScript, we use document by get element by ID. So we can manipulate the div element by using that ID, get document by dot get element by ID. Similarly, we use reference to manipulate the that element. How to use the ref? We create the useRef, and it allows us to easily use React refs. We call useRef at top of component, that is when the component starts, and attach the returned value to the element's ref attribute to refer to it. So I use this useRef and put it in some variable, and that variable is attached to the ref property of the input box to manipulate that input box. That is the purpose of useRef. Once we create a reference, we use the current property to modify. Modify means mutate the element. The element's properties, or can call any other function related to that element. So once I attach the variable to the ref property or ref attribute of the any element, I can use the current property of this useRef to modify the element. So when I create the useRef, so for example, I create constant a equal to react.useRef, and I give some value in it, initially less than null. Then to use or to manipulate this, I get the parameter called as a.current. So if I pass this 0, that means a.current will have the value of 0. Okay, so to manipulate the element or to use this reference, I use a.current kind of syntax to access the value of this use reference. We'll see some examples, but this was the basic meaning of what are the refs. I put it here. Okay. Okay, so now since the server is started, okay, let me okay, it has started at 3001 port. So let's go here, and instead of 3000, let's go 3001. Still starting. Okay, so by the time it starts, we'll create one example, and I'll show you that example. Okay, so this is my example. I'll be creating multiple example of the useRef. So I'll be creating components here, different components to see the different examples. For example, I create view1 for first example, and here I return. Okay, let's call this component inside my example. Okay, so this is my first example of useRef. It's taking a lot of time. Okay, done. So I'm in this example page. I'm in the view 1. Okay, so let's do it the view 1. So I'll create one example so that you can see how the useRef are used. So in this example, I'll create first another use state variable. I'll say react.useState, and I'll put some value, or some value will come inside here. So I created one state variable query, and I use the setter method called a set query, and I created some value as a default value. Then in the second line, I created the reference. Maybe I can say search input equal to React.useRef, and initially I gave the value of null. So we can give some value also, but since I want to attach this to input box, I don't need the initial value, so I pass the null as the initial value. Now here in this view, I will create one input box. So let me create an input box with type equal to text and reference equal to this search input. So whatever in the use reference variable I created, I put it inside the reference one, and then I'll say value. What will be the default value? It will be this query. Okay, so let's see how it looks now. So we have the sum value, though I cannot change it because I haven't written the onChange value behavior, but I can see the text box. And to manipulate the properties of this text input, I can use this search input, and I can manipulate it as I will show you now. Okay, so now I will put something on change of this text field. I can take the event. I'll pass the function here on the arrow function, and in the arrow function I will set query equal to e dot target dot value. So I can change the value of the input box with this one. So now I can change the value of this one. So now I'll show you how I will change the property of this input box once I click a button. So I'll create a button on I will say okay, on click equal to, I will create one function called as handle button, and I'll say handle. Okay, let's create the handle button. So I'll create this function called as constant handle button equal to, I'll create arrow function, and inside the arrow function I will manipulate this search input box. So for example, first thing which I want to do is, now how to access this reference or search input. So we always have to reference the search input by current property. So I'll say search input dot current. Let's see what is coming inside the current. Once I click the button, I go inside this function, then I'll see what is coming inside the search input dot current. So because always we have to use dot current property to access or manipulate this reference. I created this user reference, attached to this reference, and now I will be able to manipulate it using the current property. So we'll see what is coming inside the current property. I'll refresh it. I'll click handle. So once I click the handle, I'm getting this whole input box only like we get document by get element by ID. So we can manipulate it as document by get element by ID. If I remove the current, and then I'll show you what is coming. So, so if I remove this current, I want to see what is in the search input. You will see I get current has lot of properties. Though initially I was only able to see the string, but here now I can see all the things which I can change it. So here are the attributes, and I can manipulate everything in it. So generally, how we do it, I will show you one example. So I just want to show you that here I have everything what we get by by get element by ID. Same thing we get here, and we can manipulate in the same way as we manipulate normal HTML. Let's do one example how we do that. So first thing which I want to do is search input dot current dot value. I'll remove the value of this field. Initially it is showing what? It is showing use some value, but now I am emptying this some value. So when I click handle, what I did, search input dot current dot value. Value means whatever the value it is there inside it, make it empty. So it becomes empty. I can put again, but I can empty it again. So many times we want to empty the search content. We do like this. Okay, so this is the way we empty the content of the text box. This is one of the practical use case we do, but we can do some other stuff also. Whatever you want to do, I can do also search input dot current dot focus. I can use the focus property that when I click handle, my text should focus on the input box. So when I click handle, so you will see my focus goes here. See it gone here. So if I write on again, I click handle, it empties it and my focus goes to this text box. So this is the one thing which we can do. Another thing which we can do change the style property of it. I can say style dot background color equal to hash ffcc00. Let's say I just want to change. I just put random color. So when I click handle button, it empties it. It sets the focus and it changes the background. Okay, spelling mistake. It's search input. Okay, I handle it. So change the background, put it the cursor here, empties it. So we can manipulate the input box as we want it. So this is one of the use of the user reference, that we can change any of the properties of that text box or anything, any element in the HTML, whatever we want to do. Let's try to do another example. So let me create view 2 to show you another example. And here I call view 2. So let's call this as view 2, this as a view 1. So view 2 is all on the top. Okay, so view 2 is here, view 1 is here. So we are done with view 1. Let's take another example. Okay. Okay, let's do view 2 example. Here I have the constant. I create some state variables, name and state name equal to react.useState. Initially it is empty. Now I will say here so here I will say div. My name is name, and I want to change the name. So I will create an input box with value equal to name and on change equal to I will create arrow function, and I will say e equal to set name e dot target dot name value. I can wrap this inside the curly bracket also, and I can remove the curly bracket also if I want. So I created this input box to manipulate the text box. Okay, so let's see how it works. So here is the way to my name is whatever I put, I can see it here. Now I want to see how many times this component is rendered. So whenever I change, this component is re-rendered again. So whenever I do change, because on change will change the value of the state, on change will call the this on change will call the will change the state state variable, and once it changes the state variable, that is name is changed, it will re-render this part again. So whenever there is a variable change, state or props, it re-renders the component. This is the how React works. So I want to see how many times this view is rendered or this component is rendered. I can use React.useEffect, and this is here I will put arrow function. So I will create another state variable called as constant count, for example count, set count equal to React.useState, and initially I pass 0. Now the thing is that when this use effect will be called every time, since I'm not putting any parameter here, I'm removing this parameter. That means use effect will be called whenever this component changes or whenever the state variable changes. Now if I write that whenever the name change, I call this use effect to increase the counter. So I can use set count to count +1, for example. So anytime you change the name, this use effect will be called and it will update the counter. But the problem is here, when we update the counter, the state is changed again, and again this view is rendered. And when view will render it, again I will update this count, and again this view will be rendered. So it will go into the infinite loop, and my page will get stuck, because whenever there is a state change, I re-render this component every time. So now I cannot really count how many times my page got re-rendered, because whenever I update the count, it re-renders again. Then again I count, it will re-render again. So it will go into infinite loop. So here it is best to use the use reference rather than count. So count rather than use state. So count will be React.useRef rather than use state. If I use useRef here, then whenever I update this count, it will not re-render this component. This component can re-render only when we change the state. So when we change the name, then this component will get re-render again. But when I change the count, because it is using useRef, it will not re-render this component. So in the use effect, I will say count.current. Since everything is inside the current, I will use count.current equal to count.current +1. So whatever was the previous value, you have to add 1. Now I will say here re-render count and I will put count here. So now what will happen? Whenever I change the name, this component will re-render and I update the value of the count and I can see the count is coming here. But when count is updated, this component will not re-render. It will remain as it is. And so I can count it correctly. Okay, some error is there. Let's see what is error. Okay, so objects are, I already explained, we cannot put object inside this one in the component, so we have to say count.current. Okay, so now initially it rendered first time. So when I change something now, it is counting again. Okay, so it is re-rendering it as many times I am changing the name. So this component re-render whenever I change the value in the name field. So it has changed 40 times, 50 times, 60 times like this. So that means one example was of useRef was to attach to this input box and then we can manipulate this input box. Second example of useRef is we can use it as a variable instead of useState because useRef does not re-render the whole component. So something if we want one time or manually when it should be changed, then instead of useState, I can use the useReference. So this is another example. Let's see third example. So we saw two examples. Let's see the third example. Okay, so third example is, I'll create third example. This is a final example which I'll show you. So let me delete this part and let me delete this one. I'll keep the input box here. Okay, so I have the component 3. I have one input box. Let's put inside the div. And here, this input box, I will name it as, maybe called as first name. So maybe I can put placeholder, enter first name. I don't want to use on change now for this case, type equal to text. So here the purpose is I have two text box, enter first name, enter last name, and I can add one also more, enter middle name. So purpose of this exercise is when I am on the first input box, I place the enter button, I should go to the second input box, and when I press enter, I should go to the third input box. So this is the purpose of this exercise. So to track the enter button, we use event called as on key down equal to, I will write some function in this, and here also I'll say on key down, and here also I'll say key down. Though in the last I don't need anything because I want to go from first to middle to the last one. In the last we don't need it, but let's say if we want to go further to fourth one, so that's the reason I put it here. And in each case I will use the reference element. I use the one reference here, use the second reference here, use the third reference here. And I created 3 reference for 3 text boxes. So let's create the 3 reference. I'll say constant reference 1 equal to React.useRef. Initially it will be null since we are attaching to the reference property of the input box. I create copy 2 and 3. And I will use the use effect to focus on the first text box when the component loads. So when the component loads, I can use the use effect and I pass a rectangular bracket, so it will be called only once when the component will load. And here I will say ref1.current.focus. So when I say ref1.current.focus means wherever ref1 is attached, its current property should set to the focus. So in the first one I'll say ref1 and ref2 in the second one, and third one will be the ref3. Right now I'll pass some dummy arrow function till we write that functionality. Okay, so we have 3 input box. First one is having reference 1, second is reference 2, third is reference 3. And I have to call this view 3. Here in my example. Okay, so I'll get view 3. So you will see my cursor is going to the first one because I have written on use effect on the load of the component. I focus to the first text box. Okay, so that's why it is blinking on the first component. Now I will write down this function. So whenever I press something, I get E whenever I do key down. And let's see what E comes. I will put console.log of key is E.key and code is E.key code. So we'll see what happens when I press anything inside this first name. Okay, so I'll refresh it. So when I put anything key, you will see I get the D and code. This code is, for every letter in the keyboard, we have some key and we can track which key was pressed. I press different key, you will see different code for it. And when I press enter, you will see the key is enter and code is 13. So either you take use of this code or you take use of this key enter to know whether what user has pressed. So for now, our case, I'll take this 13. Whenever 13 is there, I will know user has clicked the 13. Okay, so what I will do, I will say if E.key code is equal to 13, why it's saying this one? Key code is deprecated. So it's saying key code is deprecated. Let's take key otherwise. Since key code is deprecated, we'll use the key and I'll use enter. So whenever the key is enter, I will say I want to move from this first input box to second input box. So I will say ref2 dot current dot focus. So I'm moving the user to another input box when user press the enter. Same thing I will do it here and copy it here. Here whenever I see enter, I will move the user to reference 3. And same thing I'll do in the third one. I will move the user to the first one again. So it will be the circle. So when I'm in the first one, I type anything, but when I type enter, I will move it to second one, and from second one I'll move to third one, and from third one I'll move to the first one again. Let's check again. So I can type anything. When I press enter, I'm in the second one. When I'm typing anything, when I press enter, I'm in the third one. Whenever I type anything, nothing happens. When I press enter, I'm in the first one. So like this, I'm moving from again. So this is another use of useRef. Mostly we use for focus, but we can use for any property change, any style change, anything change in our HTML code. So it is like a document.getElementById, but it has another functionality where I can use ref1.current when I'm not attaching to any input box. Like in case of view 2, I can use as a variable instead of useState. So either I can create useState, but if I don't want the component to re-render again, I can use this useRef also. So these are the two use cases for the useRef. So if you have any question, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll meet tomorrow. So tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we have the boot camp for 4 hours each, where whatever we did in the React, I will do a refreshing course kind of it. Maybe in 2 days, whatever we did in 18 days, past 18 days, it will be, summary of that, so that the newcomers who don't know the React, who has not joined this course, they can learn React in 2 days and understand the important concept of the React, so that they can start building project from Monday. So I'll be building the project from Monday. It will be very big project. It will be having everything what you see in internet, but little twist, because I will not exactly copy use what you see, but I will see the concept. Concept will be copied, and little twist will be there, because whatever is in my mind, I will change it according to that and build a project based on that. So let's say if I build a project like Airbnb, so looks will not be exactly Airbnb, but functionality will be similar to Airbnb. So I will be doing some changes, because I have to do something fast. Airbnb, let's say, took 1 year to complete the project, and if I'm doing in 2-3 days, I will be doing little changes in the Airbnb site, for example, and make it little bit more different, so that it can be achieved in 2-3 day time. So if you have any question, you can ask me. Otherwise, we'll meet tomorrow 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. It is 4 hours Saturday and 4 hours Sunday. It will be refreshed. But if you have understood what I have explained in this class, then you can skip those two. But if you want to refresh your knowledge, then you can join. It will be only React, and the project to do what we did, it will be the same project I'll be doing. Any questions?